This is a story about a king who spent his whole life being looked at, and a woman who never looked at him once. She didn't need to. Chapter 1. The Petition. The tariff on raw wool increased 12% in the spring. Willa knew this because she had counted every coin her village didn't earn since, and because she was standing in a throne room telling it to a king she couldn't see. 341 people, Your Majesty. Most of them rely on the wool trade to eat. 12% is the difference between a village and a memory. She said this to the heir slightly left of the throne, because that was where his voice had come from when he'd spoken to the petitioner before her. She didn't need to see him. She'd never seen anyone. She navigated the way she'd always navigated, by sound, by air current, by the particular quality of silence a room offered up when she stood still long enough to listen. This room offered up stone, age, the permanent draft that every castle pretended wasn't there, and 111 heartbeats. She'd counted on the way in. It was a habit. You couldn't see a crowd, but you could hear how large it was if you listened to the percussion section. 111 heartbeats, all keeping their own ordinary time. And then one of them stopped keeping time at all. It was the one on the throne. She knew it was the throne because the acoustics placed him higher, elevated stone, open air behind him, the way sound bent differently when it bounced off a wall that wasn't close. He was up there, and his heart had just done something medically notable. That one, Moss said. Her wolf's voice arrived the way it always did. Not as a separate thought, but as the part of her mind that processed the world at a frequency her human cognition couldn't match. Moss was the animal layer. Right now, the animal layer was very, very still. Listen to his heart, Moss said. Willa did not listen to his heart. She was in the middle of a petition about wool tariffs, and she was not going to derail it for a heartbeat, however architecturally interesting it had become. The Crown's revenue from the Thornfield district declined 9% this year, she continued. Her hands were steady on the walking staff she'd carried since she was 14. Smooth ash wood, the grip worn to the exact shape of her palm. Not because of reduced trade, because of reduced survival. You're taxing the thing that feeds itself. In another season, there'll be nothing left to tariff. She let the silence sit. She was good at silence, at knowing exactly how long to let a room be uncomfortable. The king had not spoken. She could feel him not speaking. It had a texture. Not the polite silence of a ruler considering a petition, but the particular stillness of a man whose wolf had just informed him of something catastrophic and permanent. Home, Moss said. Quietly, without urgency, as if naming a fact she'd known for a long time and was only now mentioning. That's the one. Willa's grip tightened on the staff. Her wolf had just identified the King of Blackwell as her fated mate, while she was standing in his throne room delivering tariff arithmetic. The timing was, she felt, unhelpful. We are here about the wool tariff, she told her wolf. Yes, and also he is home. Both things are true. From the throne, the king cleared his throat. When he spoke, his voice was lower than she'd expected. Rough at the edges, like he'd forgotten to manage it. Your village, Thornfield. Yes. How long has the tariff been in effect? Since the first thaw, 4 months. A pause. She heard him shift, leather creaking, something heavy settling differently. The whisper of a cloak or the particular way a large man rearranged himself when he was trying very hard to look like he was thinking about policy. Griff, the king said. A second voice, closer, to the left, steady and dry. Your Majesty. The Thornfield tariff. Pull it. A beat. All of it, sir? All of it. Effective today. Willa blinked. She had prepared a 12-point argument. She had rehearsed counterpoints to 7 likely objections. She had walked 2 days to deliver a case she could have won in her sleep, and he'd conceded it in 11 seconds. That's appreciated, Your Majesty. I need to tell you something. His voice had changed. Not the pitch, the register, the managed mode dropping half a step toward real. like a door that had been latched and quietly unlatched. My wolf has just informed me of something I didn't expect to hear in a tariff petition. The room shifted. 110 heartbeats recalibrating. She felt the change, the particular quality of attention that happened when a room full of wolves heard their king say, "My wolf," in that tone. "Your wolf," she said. "Not you?" "I'm catching up. He's faster." "He is honest," Ma said. "I like this about him." "What did your wolf tell you, Your Majesty?" "The same thing yours told you, about 90 seconds ago. I could hear your heartbeat change from here." The room went very quiet. Not court quiet, the careful silence of protocol. This was the other kind, the loaded kind. The kind where 110 wolves understood what was happening before the words caught up. Willa's hands were steady, her heart was not. Her wolf was humming, the low, certain frequency of an animal that had found what it had been calibrated to find. "You could hear my heartbeat," she said, "from the throne. You could hear mine. You're louder." She heard something happen to his breathing, the start of a laugh that caught itself, the beginning of something involuntary. "I want to court you," he said. "Not stay for dinner. Not let's discuss this privately. Not any of the managed, strategic, careful things a king could have said to delay, to assess, to maintain the performance. Just, I want to court you." She felt the room absorb it. She felt Dory, 4 seats behind her in the public gallery, radiating the particular warm satisfaction of a woman who had not been surprised, lean forward. "You don't know me," Willa said. "That's what the courting is for. You don't know that I'm—" She stopped. Not because the word was hard, because she'd been about to say it as a warning, and it wasn't a warning, it was a fact. "I'm blind, Your Majesty, since birth." The room adjusted again. She felt it. The intake of breath from 8 directions, the micro-shift of bodies, the particular quality of silence that happened when sighted people realized they'd missed something obvious about someone standing right in front of them. The king's heartbeat didn't change. Either he'd already known, or it didn't alter the calculation. "I know," he said. "You knew? You've been addressing a point 3 feet to the left of my throne for the last 4 minutes. You navigate by sound, not sight. You oriented to my voice, not my position." A pause. "I'm a wolf king. I notice things. Sometimes." "Sometimes," Moss said. His heart rate is 117. He noticed us in the first 3 seconds and has been trying to function ever since. Sometimes is generous. "You want to court a blind woman," Willa said. "A wool trader from a village of 341 people. I want to court the woman my wolf recognized before she finished her second sentence. The wool and the blindness are details I'll learn. The blindness is not a detail." "No, but it's not a disqualification." His voice was steady. The steadiness cost him. She could hear the effort underneath, the careful construction of calm over something that wasn't calm at all. "Unless you're saying no." Willa stood in the throne room, staff in hand. Heart doing things she hadn't authorized. Her wolf was certain. Her wolf had been certain since the first heartbeat. Willa was slower than her wolf. It was a known issue. "I'm saying that I want the tariff rescission in writing before anything else happens." "Done. On sealed parchment." "Done. And I'm saying yes." She heard the sound of a king smiling. She couldn't see it, but she could hear the muscles in his face rearrange, the shift in the way his breath moved through his jaw. A sound sighted people never noticed because they were too busy watching. She noticed everything. Behind the throne, Griff said nothing. He didn't need to. The beta who had served Ansel Blackwell for 11 years looked at the blind woman with the ashwood staff and the devastating composure and thought, very quietly, "Good." Chapter 2. The Gifts That Missed. The courtship began on the 3rd day, and it began badly. The painting arrived first, a full-length portrait of the king, commissioned in what she was told were oils, on a canvas the height of a door. 2 servants carried it into the guest quarters and propped it against the wall with the careful reverence of men presenting a masterwork. "His Majesty commissioned this for you," the taller one said. "The court painter worked through the night." Willa stood in the center of the room and listened to 2 men breathe nervously in the presence of a very large painting she could not see. "It's on canvas?" she said. "Yes, my lady." "Oils?" "Yes, the finest." She crossed the room, found the canvas by the smell of linseed oil and turpentine. She put her hand on it. Flat, slightly textured from the brushwork. Cool. Under her fingertips, ridges where the paint had been applied thick. A nose, she guessed, or a brow ridge. "He sent us a painting," Moss said, "of himself. He sent a painting of himself to a blind woman. He is going to be so embarrassed when he realizes." "Please thank His Majesty," Willa said. "The frame is lovely. I can feel the carvings." She was going to enjoy this. The flowers arrived that afternoon. A massive arrangement. She could hear the servants struggling with the weight of the vase as they set it on the table. The scent hit her immediately. Roses. Dozens of them. Roses were, in Willa's professional opinion, the most overrated flower in existence. They looked beautiful, apparently. She wouldn't know. What she did know was that they smelled like approximately nothing. A vague sweetness with no character, no complexity, no warmth. A flower chosen for its appearance by a man who had forgotten that appearance was not available. She buried her face in them anyway, because she was being courted and she wasn't a monster. They smelled like a polite suggestion of a flower. Lavender, Moss said. Honeysuckle. Wild garlic, even. Anything with a real scent. He picked the ones that look the best. We cannot see them. This is going to be educational for him. That evening, a gown was delivered. Deep blue, she was told. The color of a twilight sky to match the mood of the court. The fabric was silk. Beautiful silk. Silk that made her skin feel like it was being quietly judged by 1,000 tiny threads. She wore it to dinner because the courtship was 3 days old and she was willing to give him the benefit of doubt. She sat through the entire meal feeling like she was wrapped in a disapproving whisper. The gown was stunning, apparently. 3 courtiers complimented it. Her skin itched for 2 hours afterward. "The gown," Ansel said, finding her in the east corridor after dinner. His footsteps had the particular cadence of a man who had been looking for someone and was pretending he'd happened past by accident. Was it? It was beautiful. You're saying that in the voice you used on the roses. What voice? The voice that means, thank you for the effort was wrong. She stopped walking, turned toward him. She could feel his heat. He'd learned to stand at the right distance, close enough that she could track him without straining, far enough that she didn't feel crowded. He'd learned this in 3 days. She filed that. "The roses smelled like politeness," she said. "The gown felt like being criticized. And you sent me a painting." A silence. The specific silence of a man processing exactly where he'd gone wrong. "The painting," he said, "of yourself. In oils." He stopped. She heard the sound of a hand dragging over a face. "I sent you a painting." "You did?" "You're blind." "I am." "I sent a blind woman a painting of my face." "You really did?" "In my defense." He stopped again. There was no defense. She heard him arrive at this realization in real time. The exhale through the nose, the shift of weight, the particular groan of a man who had just understood the full scope of his own foolishness. 104, Moss reported. That is actually lower than usual. He is not panicking. He is genuinely mortified. This is different. I find it endearing. "I don't know how to do this," he said. "Court someone?" "Court you. Everything I know, everything I've been taught, everything I've seen, every tool I have, it's all visual. Flowers, gowns, art, architecture, the view from the tower, The sunset from the east balcony. None of it reaches you. The sunset from the east balcony? Yes, I was going to take you tomorrow. Does the sun set in the east in Blackwell territory, Your Majesty? A beat. A very long beat. It sets in the west, he said. It does. I was going to take you to the west balcony. Were you? I'm going to stop talking now. Don't. You're much better when you stop trying. He was. That was the thing she'd already noticed, the thing that made the painting and the roses and the silk gown forgivable. When he stopped performing the courtship. When he stopped reaching for the toolkit he'd been given. When he just stood there and talked to her like a person whose world was organized differently from his. He was the best company she'd ever had. His voice dropped register. His sentences got shorter. His humor arrived without announcement. One exact thing, then he moved on. And she had to decide whether to acknowledge that it was funny or let it sit there being quietly devastating. Tell me what would work, he said, not as a king requesting information, as a man asking for help. I'll know it when you find it, she said. So will you. She walked away. Her staff tapped the stone. Behind her, she heard him stand very still for a long time. Griff found his king in the corridor 14 minutes later, standing exactly where Willa had left him. The painting, Griff said. Don't. The roses. Griff. The silk gown, on a woman who works with wool. I am your king, and I am telling you, you sent a painting to a blind woman of your face. I am going to demote you. You've said that 11 times this year, sir. The paperwork never materializes. Chapter 3. The Learning. It took him 8 days to find it. Not because he was slow, he wasn't. He was a man who had run a kingdom since he was 20, who held his wolf and his council and his borders in steady hands, who made decisions that affected thousands of lives with a precision Willa found genuinely impressive. But courtship was not governance. Courtship required a different precision, the kind that couldn't be delegated, couldn't be strategized, couldn't be managed. And every tool in his arsenal was built for a world she couldn't see. Day 4. He took her to the royal garden, walked her through it, describing the layout, the hedgerows, the fountain, the rose arbor. She listened. It was nice. It was someone else's experience, narrated at her. Day 5. He brought her a music box. Carved wood, a mechanism inside that played a melody when the lid opened. Better. She held it, felt the carvings under her fingertips, a wolf and a woman intertwined. The melody was simple and sweet. She kept it by her bed. Day 6. He tried to describe the sunset. Badly. The sky it's orange. Not fire orange, more like copper that's been left out. She told him she didn't know what copper looked like either. He went quiet for a long time. She could hear him restructuring his entire understanding of what description meant. Day 7. He showed up at her door with wool. Not fine wool, not silk or satin or anything the palace had. Raw wool, still carrying the scent of lanolin, packed in 6 bundles from 6 different sheep breeds. He'd sent a rider to 2 different farms. The rider had returned confused. Ansel had told Griff to find him the most interesting wool in the territory, and Griff, who understood exactly what was happening, had done it without commentary. This is from the Highland sheep, Ansel said, the long-haired ones. I'm told the fiber is different. Willa sat cross-legged on the floor of the guest quarters and sorted the wool by hand. Coarse Highland, fine Lowland, the dense, oily wool of the marsh breeds. A dark fiber from the mountain flocks that felt almost like silk under her fingers, but held its shape better. This one, she said, holding up the mountain wool. This is extraordinary. The crimp is tight, but it's soft. Where is this from? The Blackridge flock, east of the mountains. I've never worked with fiber this good. The staple length alone. She stopped. She was deep in wool talk. She was on the floor of a guest room in a king's palace, deep in wool talk. and the king was sitting across from her watching her handle sheep fiber with the same expression that sighted people apparently used when they saw something beautiful. She couldn't see his expression, but she could hear his breathing. It had gone very quiet, not managed, not strategic, just quiet. The breathing of a man who had stopped trying to impress her and was watching her be herself instead. "There," Moss said. "That's the one. That's the version of him we want." "You don't care about wool," she said. "I care about the way you care about wool." It was the first thing he'd said in 8 days that made her wolf go still. Not the wolf layer of attraction. That had been there since the throne room. Something else. The human part of wanting. The part that was earned, not fated. "That's better than the painting," she said. "Most things are better than the painting." Day 8. He asked her to teach him, not wool, everything. How she mapped a room, how she cooked, by smell and texture and the sound of oil in a pan. How she read people, which was better than anyone in his court could read people, including his beta who'd been doing it professionally for 11 years. He was a good student, focused, specific in his questions. And when he got something wrong, when he said, "Look at this," and caught himself, when he tried to hand her something from the wrong side, when he forgot that pointing was not a form of communication, he corrected without fuss and moved forward. "You're not embarrassed anymore," she said on the 9th day. "I'm perpetually embarrassed. I've just learned to be efficient about it." She laughed, the real kind, unstoppable. And his breathing changed the way it always did when she laughed. The warm note in his scent, iron and cedar and the green underneath, surged. She'd identified the pattern by now. His body chemistry shifted when she was happy. He couldn't control it. His scent advertised his emotional state to the only person in the castle who was paying attention to scent over sight. By the end of the 2nd week, he'd stopped bringing gifts entirely. Instead, he brought experiences. The forge. She loved the forge. The heat, the ringing of metal, the way the smith's hammer created a rhythm she could follow with her whole body. Ansel stood beside her and described what the smith was making. Not what it looked like, but what it was becoming. She could hear him learning the difference. The stables. She hadn't expected to like the stables, but the horses were warm and enormous, and they didn't care that she was blind. She put her hand on a mare's neck and felt the muscle shiver under her palm, and the mare turned her head and breathed into Willa's hair, and something in Willa's chest loosened. The kitchen, at midnight. He'd bribed the cook to leave out ingredients. They made bread together in the dark. He'd blown out the candles, he told her, so they were even. They weren't even. She moved through the dark kitchen with practiced ease. He knocked over 2 bowls, dropped a bag of flour that exploded on his boots, and burned his hand on the oven door. "How do you do this?" he said, running his hand under cold water. "Practice," she said. 24 years of it. "You're better at everything without sight than I am with it." "Not everything. I'm told you're quite good at looking imposing." "I am imposing." "I'll take your word for it. Literally." The bread was lopsided and dense and slightly burned on the bottom. He ate 3 pieces. She ate 2. The kitchen smelled like yeast and flour dust and the warm, cedar and iron scent of a king who had given up performing and was sitting on a stone floor with burned fingers and breadcrumbs on his formal shirt. His heartbeat, Moss said. Not reporting the rate this time, just listening to it. The steady hum attending to something worth attending to. It has been consistent for the last 20 minutes. No managing, no performing, just beating. This is the first time his heart has been honest while he knew we were listening. Willa reached over and took his hand, the one with the burn. She held it carefully, her thumb running over the reddened skin. He didn't breathe. "You don't have to hold your breath when I touch you," she said. "I'm not—" He stopped. Because he was, and they both knew it. "What does it feel like when I hold my breath?" "Like the room gets smaller. You take up a lot of space with your breathing. When it stops, I notice." "Is that good or bad?" "It's information." She didn't let go of his hand. He didn't pull it away. Outside the kitchen window, something she would never see was happening to the sky. She knew because the air was cooling and the night insects had shifted rhythm. She didn't need to see it. She had the flower on his shirt, the calluses on his palm, the steady now heartbeat that had finally stopped lying to both of them. Chapter 4. The Face. It was the end of the third week when she asked. They were in the east garden, her favorite because the rosemary grew thick along the south wall and the late-season lavender filled the air with something she could actually appreciate. Sighted people liked this garden for the view. Willa liked it because it was the most densely scented place in the castle, and because the stone bench held the day's warmth long after the air cooled. He was describing rain. She'd asked him to, not what it looked like, what it felt like from inside the castle, watching it through a window. It changes the light, he said. Everything goes gray. Not a sad gray, a quieter one. Like the world got softer. Better. What else? The stone darkens when it's wet. The courtyard looks like... He stopped himself, rerouted. He'd gotten faster at this, catching the visual description before it arrived and translating it into sensation. The courtyard smells different in rain. Did you notice? Colder. Something in the stone opens up. Petrichor. The minerals in the limestone release when water hits them. You know the word for it. I know the words for a lot of things I've never seen. It's how I build the world. He went quiet. She could feel him thinking, the particular quality of his silence when he was processing something that had reorganized his assumptions. She'd cataloged 3 different types of his silence by now. The managed one, strategic, measured, deployed in council meetings and public audiences. The stunned one, when she said something that went through his defenses before he could arrange them. And this one, the thinking silence. The one where he forgot she was there because he was too busy understanding something she'd said. I want to see your face, she said. The thinking silence broke. His heartbeat, which had been at its honest resting pace, jumped. I want to touch your face, to see it, my way. She heard him swallow. She heard the leather of his belt creak as he turned toward her on the bench. She heard 23 things happen to his body in the space of 2 seconds, none of which he had authorized or could control. Yes, he said. She set her staff against the bench, turned toward him, raised her hands. She found his jaw first, the sharp line of it. His mother had been right if what he'd told her was true. It did make him seem harder than he was. The muscle was clenched at the joint. She felt it under her fingertips and pressed gently until it released. You're clenching. I know. Stop. I'm trying. She moved up, cheekbone, high and definite, the kind of bone structure that made people look twice. She traced the hollow beneath his eye, the ridge of his brow, heavier than she'd expected. This was a face built for severity, she thought. Built to keep people at a distance. Everything about its architecture said, don't come closer. He'd been born with fortifications. She found the scar under his left eye. A thin ridge, half an inch, healed rough. Her fingers paused there. The horse, she said, when you were 12. You remember. I remember everything you tell me. She moved to his nose, slightly crooked, broken once, she guessed, and set imperfectly. She traced the bridge, the tip. He breathed out, warm against her fingers. His mouth, the lower lip fuller than the upper. She mapped it slowly. The corner where the muscle kept almost moving, the one that signaled the smile he was always managing. She felt it twitch under her fingertip. You're smiling. I'm not. The muscle at the corner of your mouth is contracting. I can feel it. That's not fair. None of this is fair. I know what you look like without ever seeing you. I know you clench your jaw when you're nervous, and your brow furrows when you're thinking, and your mouth moves before your brain gives it permission. I know you better than anyone who's ever looked at your face, Ansel, because I'm paying attention to what the face is doing instead of what it looks like. His breathing had gone ragged, not managed at all. The underneath version, the one she'd learned to recognize as the real him. His heart was doing something she didn't bother counting because the number didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that it was honest. "You're the only person who's ever—" He stopped. She felt his jaw work under her hand, felt him try to find the words and fail. The king who commanded language, who managed every sentence, who delivered policy and judgment and diplomacy with measured precision. He couldn't finish a sentence with her hands on his face. "He is trying to say that no one has ever known him," Moss said. "He does not have the words for it because he has never needed them before. No one has been close enough to require them." "I know," Willa said. "You don't have to say it." She felt his hands come up. They settled over hers, pressing her palms against his face, holding them there, as if he was afraid she'd pull away before she was finished. He leaned into her hands, the full weight of his head in her palms. A man who held a kingdom on his shoulders, letting someone else hold him. "I want to kiss you," she said. His heart stopped. Actually stopped. 1 beat, 2, a silence where a heartbeat should have been. Then, "Yes, please, yes." She kissed him. She knew where his mouth was. She'd mapped it 15 seconds ago. She found it the way she found everything, by paying attention to what other people overlooked. His hands moved, one to her waist, one to the back of her neck. He kissed her back, not gently, not with the measured restraint of a king performing tenderness. He kissed her the way his wolf had wanted to kiss her since the throne room, with 3 weeks of evidence behind it, with the flower on his shirt and the burned hand and the wool on the floor and every failed gift and every learned success. He kissed her like he'd been composing this sentence for weeks and had finally found the words. The garden smelled like rosemary and late lavender and the warm iron cedar of a man whose scent had stopped lying. When they separated, his forehead against hers, breathing wrecked, she said, "You taste like the bread we made." That was 4 days ago. Good bread lingers. He laughed, the real one, the whole one, the one she'd been collecting pieces of since the throne room, hearing it start and stop, start and stop. This time it finished. It sounded like what she imagined sunrise looked like. Sudden, warm, and impossible to look away from. She couldn't look away from it. She didn't need to. She was already there. Chapter 5. The Knowing and the Cost. Week 4. She knew him now. Not the way you know someone after 4 weeks, the shallow map, the approximate shape. She knew him the way a cartographer knew terrain she'd walked on foot, measuring each contour by the pressure under her boots. She knew his fighting voice. She'd sat at the edge of the training yard and listened to him spar with the guard. The footwork patterns, the breathing shifts, the grunt of exertion when he committed to a strike. On the 3rd day, she'd called out, "You drop your left shoulder before every high strike. The pattern repeats every 4th engagement." The yard went quiet. What?" Ansel said, breathing hard. Sweating. She could smell it. Salt and iron and effort. "You telegraph. Your left shoulder drops a 1/4 beat before the swing. Anyone who's paying attention could read it." The swordsmaster, a man named Calloway, who'd trained Ansel since boyhood, made a sound. She couldn't see his expression, but the sound suggested that a woman who had never held a sword had just identified a weakness he'd missed for 15 years. "She's right," Calloway said eventually. "The drop is there. I've been looking at his footwork." She was listening to it. "Tarn is very quiet right now," Moss said. "His wolf is having what I believe sighted people call a moment. The specific kind of moment where you realize the person you love is better at something than you are, and it does not threaten you. It just makes you more." She knew his political voice. She'd heard him in council through the wall of the adjoining corridor. The measured cadence, the weighted pauses, the way he used silence as a tool the same way she did. She could hear the difference between the voice he used when he agreed with his counsel and the voice he used when he didn't. A fractional drop in warmth, a precision in the consonants that only appeared when he was about to overrule someone. She knew his private voice, the one that existed only when they were alone, lower, less careful, with a specific crack in the vowels that meant he was about to say something true. This voice had told her about his mother's death, about the year he'd taken the throne at 20 and spent 6 months pretending he knew what he was doing, while Griff held the actual kingdom together. About the dog he'd had as a child, a hunting hound named Boot, who'd slept on his bed every night until he was 13, and who he still, privately, missed. She knew his body. Not in the full sense. They hadn't crossed that line, and wouldn't until the bond was complete. And the bond wouldn't complete until she was ready. But she knew his architecture, the way his shoulders sat, slightly forward, carrying weight even when standing still. The calluses on his sword hand, the scar at the heel of his palm from a bar fight at 15. The way he leaned into her hand when she touched him, every time, as if the contact was gravity he'd been waiting to fall into. She knew him, fully, specifically, irreversibly. And on the 23rd day, she heard a visiting dignitary say 2 words in the corridor outside her quarters that made the knowing crack. Blind Queen. Not said with malice, said with pity. Said in the particular tone of a person who thought they were being compassionate and was actually being devastating. A tone Willa had heard her entire life, and had learned to walk through the way she walked through every room, by mapping it, by navigating it, by refusing to let it stop her. But this time the words carried something new. Not blind woman, not the blind trader from Thornfield. Blind Queen. The word that named the future, the word that made this permanent. She sat on the edge of the bed. The linens smelled like lavender, and the cedarwood sachet Ansel had started leaving on her pillow. A small thing, a scent gift, the kind of courtship gesture he'd learned to build for her world instead of his. She held the sachet in her hands and breathed the cedar and felt something shift in her chest that she'd been holding steady for 23 days. Willa, Moss said. I know. You've known since the beginning. You chose not to look at it. I chose to look at everything else first. And she had. She'd looked at his voice and his heartbeat and his scent and his laughter and the way his hands held hers and the flower on his shirt and the wool on the floor and the burned fingers and the bad painting and the good bread and every single thing about this man that didn't require sight to love. But love, it turned out, didn't eliminate the cost. It clarified it. She would marry this man. She would sit beside him on a throne she would navigate by echo and stone warmth. She would carry his children and know them by their scent and the pitch of their crying and the weight of them in her arms. She would grow old with someone whose face she'd mapped with her fingertips but would never, not once, not ever, actually see. She would never see him smile. She would hear it. She would feel the muscle move under her thumb. But the image, the expression that apparently made Griff look away and Pemberton clear his throat and every person in the court stammer, would never exist for her. She would love a man whose face was a country she would never visit. This was not self-pity. Willa Hartley did not do self-pity. This was accounting. This was the ledger of what she was choosing and what it would cost. And she was a woman who counted everything, because counting was how she survived. She found him after the midday meal. He was in the study. She knew by the scratch of his pen, the particular quality of focused silence, the scent of ink and parchment, and the cedar that clung to everything he touched. I need to talk to you, she said. The pen stopped. I love you, she said. She said it first because it was true, and because what came next would make it sound like it wasn't. I want you to know that what I'm about to say doesn't change that, but I need to say it. She heard him stand. The chair, the footsteps, 2, 3, and then he stopped. He'd learned her distance. He always stopped exactly where she could feel his warmth without being crowded. I will never see your face, she said. The fact voice, the one she used for tariffs and wool grades, and the things that were true regardless of anyone's feelings about them. Not when you're laughing, not when you look at me in whatever way everyone keeps telling me you look at me. I will never see our children and know they have your eyes, or your jaw, or that crooked nose you got in a fight you lost. I didn't lose. You told me Griff won it. A breath, the managed mode, reaching for itself, failing. Yes, fine, I lost. I will never see gold. Everyone says your eyes go gold when your wolf surfaces, and I have no concept of what gold looks like. It's a word. It's a word for a color I will never experience, and I will hear about it for the rest of my life from people who can see it, and I never will. Her hands were shaking. This was the tell, the only physical tell she had, the one she couldn't manage, the one that appeared only when she was saying something that cost her. She heard him notice. She heard his breathing change, not the managed version, not the stunned version, the other one, the one she hadn't cataloged yet because she'd never heard it before. The sound of a man whose heart was breaking in real time. I have built a world where none of this matters, she said. I navigate castles and trade wool and read rooms full of people, and I am not diminished by any of it. But this, loving you, this is the first time blindness has felt like losing something. Because there is a version of you that everyone else gets to see and I don't. And I didn't know that would be hard until it was. She stopped. The room was very quiet. Moss was silent, not absent, but silent. The way you go silent when someone you are part of is finally saying the thing they've been carrying. I'm not leaving, Willa said. I'm not that stupid. I'm just telling you that it costs something, and I need you to know what it costs. When he spoke, his voice was something she'd never heard before. Low, stripped. Not the king, not the managed version, not even the real version she'd learned in corridors and kitchens and gardens. Something under all of those. Something that had been there the whole time and had never had a reason to surface. Willa. Yes. I sat in the dark for you. She blinked. What? Last week, after you fell asleep on my shoulder in the library, and I sat still for 2 hours because I didn't want to wake you. After you left, I went to my room and put out every candle. I sat on the floor in the dark for 2 hours, and I listened. She didn't speak. I heard the stone. I heard something in the walls I've never noticed. A sound, a draft, something in the timber. I heard my own breathing and it was too loud, and I thought, this is what she means when she says I'm loud. And I sat there and I listened to a world I'd never heard, because I'd never bothered to close my eyes. His voice cracked, not a large crack, a fracture, thin and precise, running through the middle of a sentence that had been carrying more weight than it was built for. I can't give you gold. I can't give you the sunrise or the way the garden looks in morning light, or the expression on my face when I see you walk into a room and forget what I was saying. I know I can't. And I would dismantle this castle stone by stone if it would change that. 148, Moss said, very quietly, and then, for the first time in 4 weeks, added something that wasn't clinical, wasn't observational, wasn't the serene, brutally honest animal layer of a single mind doing its job. He means it. All of it. I've been listening to him for 23 days, and this is the first time every part of him is saying the same thing. But you see me, he said. You see me in ways I didn't know a person could be seen. You heard my fear in a council meeting through a wall. You found a flaw in my sword work from 40 feet away by sound. You know when I'm lying by the consonants in my voice. You knew I was smiling before I knew I was smiling. You mapped my face with your hands, and you knew more about it than I've learned in 31 years of looking at it in a mirror. He was close now. She could feel his breath, the warmth of him. His hand found hers, the burned one. She held it. I don't need you to see me, he said. I need you to stay. The courtyard was quiet. The morning air moved through the space between them, cool, carrying the first green warmth of the day, the stone not yet heated. The lavender from the east garden drifted. Somewhere far away, a thrush sang. Willa Hartley had spent 24 years building a world that didn't require sight. She had built it well. She had built it so well that she sometimes forgot it had walls. He had just walked through every one of them. "You sat in the dark," she said. "I did. For 2 hours. It was the least useful and most important thing I've ever done." She laughed. It came out wet. Not a full cry. She was not going to cry in a courtyard at dawn. But the laugh had water in it, and she heard his breath catch when he heard it, and she felt his thumb move across her knuckles. "That's better than the painting," she whispered. Everything is better than the painting. Chapter 6. The Marking. She didn't leave. She'd never been going to leave. She'd known that. Moss had known that. Probably Dory had known that. Dory, who had moved into the palace kitchen on day 11 and started reorganizing the spice stores with the ruthless efficiency of a woman who was not visiting. What she'd needed was not reassurance. Reassurance was what sighted people gave when they couldn't fix the actual problem. What she'd needed was to be known, to say the things she carried and have it held by someone who understood what it weighed. He'd held it. Not by fixing it, by sitting in the dark. 3 days passed after the courtyard. Good days, the kind of days where the shape of the future became less abstract and more specific. Conversations about which wing of the castle she'd want modified, which corridors needed railings, how the throne room's acoustics could be adjusted so she could map petitioners' positions by sound. Practical things. Real things. "Griff says you approved 3 petitions yesterday without reading them," Willa said on the second evening. They were in the library. She was on the floor. She preferred floors, she told him. Chairs put you at sighted people height, and she navigated better from below. He was in a chair because he was the king, and the king sat in chairs. "Griff is a liar. Griff is the most honest man in this castle. What were the petitions?" One was a grazing rights dispute, one was a request to rename a bridge, and one was... He paused. Was what? A formal petition from Lord Pemberton to enter the Queen's name into the royal charter. She went still. What queen? Pemberton seems to think there's going to be one. He hasn't been told there's going to be one. He doesn't need to be told. He was at the dinner. He heard you handle him better than I've ever handled him, and then he watched me eat 3 pieces of burned bread with flour on my shirt. The man draws conclusions. And you approved this petition? I did. Without reading it. I read that one. Moss hummed. Not a word, not a report. Just the low frequency of rightness. I haven't said yes, Willa said. You haven't said no. Saying nothing is not consent, Your Majesty. No, but making my cook reorganize the spice stores and installing a railing in the East Corridor and training my swordsmaster's ear because you felt his footwork drills were insufficiently rigorous, that's not nothing either. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. You're doing the thing, he said. What thing? The thing where you're about to argue with a point you know is valid. Your jaw shifts. I've learned to hear it. You cannot hear my jaw. You taught me to listen. She sat on the floor of the library and felt something in her chest that she didn't have a name for. Not happiness. She'd been happy before, and this wasn't that. Not love. She'd been in love for weeks, and this had a different temperature. It was closer to recognition. The sense of arriving at a place you've never been, and knowing it anyway. The sound of a key in a lock you didn't know you'd been carrying. He'd learned to hear her jaw. He'd learned to listen because she'd taught him. And now, he could hear the things about her that she'd thought were invisible. The tells she'd built her defenses around. The jaw shift, the handshake, the half-beat pause before a sentence that cost her. He'd mapped them the way she'd mapped his face. Not by sight, by attention. She stood up, crossed the room, found him by his heartbeat. It was loud, as always, and it was fast, as always, and it was honest. She put her hands on his face, the jaw she'd memorized, the scar she'd found, the mouth that couldn't stop almost smiling. I want to mark you, she said. His heart stopped. The actual pause, 1 beat, two, that she'd heard once before, in the garden, when she'd said she wanted to kiss him, the silence where a heartbeat should have been, as if his body needed a moment to catch up with what his wolf had known for 23 days. Tarn. She felt him, not through sound, not through scent, but through the bond that had been forming since the throne room, the thread between them that wasn't complete but was there, vibrating, waiting, his wolf reaching for hers. Yes, Tarn said. And then, for the first time, not to Ansel, to her. Through the almost bond, through the connection that was one bite away from permanent. Please. Oh, Moss said. He said please. His wolf said please. I am going to need a moment. Several moments. I was not prepared for this. You're sure? He said. His voice was wrecked, low and shaking and stripped of every performance he'd ever built. I have been sure since you brought me the wool, she said. I have been sure since you sat in the dark. I have been sure since you burned your hand on the oven door and ate 3 pieces of terrible bread and described rain as the world getting softer. I am not a woman who is unsure about things, Ansel. I am a woman who counts heartbeats, and yours has been telling me the same thing for 4 weeks. And I am done pretending I need more evidence. She bit him, at the junction of neck and shoulder, where the pulse ran closest to the surface, where the bond would seat itself deepest. She felt it complete, not as a sound, not as a sight, but as a frequency. A new channel opening in her senses, one that carried him, his heartbeat, his warmth, his location, his emotional state, all of it humming along a thread that ran from her teeth to some deep center of herself she hadn't known existed. He shuddered. She felt it, his whole body, under her hands. Then he turned his head, and he marked her back. At the same place on her neck, precise, gentle, deliberate, as if he'd memorized where she'd bitten and wanted the symmetry. The bond settled. Not with drama, not with the cosmic fanfare she'd been told to expect from every story she'd ever heard about mate bonds completing. It settled the way a key settles in a lock, the way a heartbeat finds its rhythm, the way Moss had said home in the throne room on the first day. Quietly, certainly, as if naming something that had always been true and was only now being acknowledged. Home, Moss said. Home, Tarn answered. Willa held a king in a library and felt the bond hum between them. His heart, her heart, one rhythm, and knew that she would never see his face. She knew it the way she knew everything, completely, specifically, and without needing to see it. It was enough. It had always been enough. She just needed to let it be. Griff found them 17 minutes later. The king was on the floor. This was unusual. The blind woman from Thornfield was on the floor with him, which was less unusual. She preferred floors. They were sitting shoulder to shoulder against the library shelves. The king had a mark on his neck that was going to bruise. The woman had a matching one. Griff looked at the marks. He looked at the king. He looked at the woman whose composure had not shifted even slightly, despite the fact that she had just bitten the King of Blackwell in a library. Shall I tell Lord Pemberton he can process that charter? Griff said. Yes, Ansel said. And the painting? What about the painting? It's still in her quarters. I assumed, given... Burn it, Willa said. Yes, my lady. Epilogue, 3 months later. The throne room had a second throne now. Not a cushion on a chair, an actual throne, carved from the same stone as the first, set 2 feet to the left so she could orient by echo, and by the particular warmth of the king beside her. Willa sat in it and listened to the room fill. 123 heartbeats today, higher than usual, a trade delegation from the Eastern Territories, Griff had told her. Important people who had opinions about important things, and who would, she predicted, spend the first 4 minutes trying to decide how to address a queen who was watching them with eyes that didn't see. She'd been right. The lead delegate, a tall man, she guessed, from the height of his voice and the way his breathing came from above her eyeline, had been standing in front of the thrones for 2 full minutes without speaking. "Your heart rate is approximately 112, she said. "Your boots are new. The leather is still creaking at the ankle, which means they haven't been broken in. You rehearsed your opening at least 4 times because you keep pausing at the same word and correcting your emphasis. You're nervous, which is understandable, but you're here about trade routes, not a sentencing. Take a breath, start again." The delegate took a breath, started again. Beside her, through the bond, she felt Ansel's amusement. Not heard, not seen, felt. The low, warm pulse of a man watching his wife handle a room full of diplomats better than he'd ever handled them. His wolf, Tarn, who had been besotted since the throne room and showed no signs of recovering, sent something through the bond that wasn't quite words. "She is extraordinary. We should be concerned about our relevance." "I am not concerned. I am too busy being proud to be concerned." Moss, in response, said nothing at all. She didn't need to. She was the steady hum, the quiet certainty, the animal layer of a single mind that had known since the first heartbeat and had simply waited for the rest of Willa to catch up. Dory was in the kitchen. She'd taken over completely by week 6 and had reorganized not just the spices, but the staff, the menus, the supply chains, and, according to Griff, the cook's marriage. "That woman," Griff had said, "is more effective than my entire administrative council." "I know," Ansel had said. "I'm considering giving her a title." She'd refuse. She'd refuse and then reorganize the titling process. The delegation finished. Willa tilted her head toward the throne beside her. She couldn't see him. She would never see him. She would never know what his eyes looked like when they went gold, or what his face did when she walked into a room, or what the sunrise looked like from the west balcony. She reached across the gap between their thrones and found his hand. She always found it. She didn't need to look. "You approved that trade agreement very quickly," she said. "It was well argued. Your heart rate didn't change while he spoke. You'd already decided before he started." "I'd decided before he entered the room. I read the brief last night." "You read briefs now?" "You told me to read briefs. You said, and I'm quoting, 'If you approve one more petition without reading it, I will reorganize your filing system and you will never find anything again.' I believed you." Smart man. Terrified man. She squeezed his hand. He squeezed back. In the throne room, 123 heartbeats continued their ordinary business, and 2 of them, one steady, one still learning, beat together in a rhythm no one else could hear. She'd never seen him. She knew him completely. That was the whole story.